Hi everybody, my name is Larsen. In this video I'm going to take the progression of the song Ladybird, and then I'm gonna first try to analyze and talk about how I think about the different chords and understand the progression and the form of the song. Then I'm gonna try to make some lines on it and talk about how I'm making the lines, so hopefully it's gonna give you some ideas about how I think when I'm making lines, but also certainly some ideas that you can sort of insert into your own playing and some stuff that you can take away from this video. So just to start with it, so Ladybird is a 16 bar form. I think the first thing that we probably need to understand about the song is the form of the song. So it's a 16 bar form. Well, actually the first thing we probably need to understand is that it's a song written by Dameron. I think there are a few different interpretations of what the melody actually is. At least I think I learned one from the old Berkeley real book, and then I've seen other ones, and I've also heard a few other interpretations of what it's supposed to be. And there's also a famous Miles Davis bebop theme on top of this called Half Nelson, which I also have a recording of me playing on my channel somewhere. I'll try to link to that in the description. So to get back to the analysis, the song is in the key of C, usually, at least. This is when we're playing it here. And I'll try to sort of edit in an overview of the progression so you can sort of follow what I'm talking about here. The first two bars is just tonic, so it's just C major for 2 bars. Then we move to the 4 minor, and in this case that's an F minor 7, B flat 7, so essentially that's a 2-5-1 in the key of E flat. But it probably makes more sense to think of it, since we're in C, to think of it as like an F minor type progression, and back to C. Then we get a cadence to A flat major 7, and this is where I sometimes get into some heated discussions on the internet, because as far as I'm concerned, A flat major 7 is sort of a well-defined part of C major 7, because it's the flat 6 out of C minor. So I'm not really sure I hear this as a modulation. And there are people who do, and however way you want to hear it, it's a 2-5-1 to A flat, and whether it modulates or not, that's up to you. It's kind of how you hear it, really. So B flat minor 7, E flat 7 to A flat major 7 for 2 bars, and then we get the dominant of the dominant. So if you're in major, then it's very common to have sort of a part of the song which first has a cadence to the dominant, and then you get the dominant, and then you or get the second part of the song, or you get the ending of the song. So in this case you get the dominant of the dominant, and that's an A minor 7, D7 cadence. Notice how I very often think of the 2 5s as sort of one thing, so I label them as one type of progression. I don't really, when I play them I might split them up, but to understand how they sit in the progression, I find it often easier to just think of them as being sort of one basic thing here. The A minor 7 and D7 are connected, and you would play them as sort of one continuous flow. You wouldn't really sort of split them up too much, and that's why I think of that as sort of 5 or 5. Then you get just 2-5 back to the 1, so D minor 7, G7, and then you get the turnaround, probably the Ladybird turnaround, which is of course what this song is most famous for. The way that I know this, again, this is something that has a few different versions. I think the one in the old real book has all major 7 chords. I'm pretty sure that the original version of that will be should be something like C major, E flat 7, A flat major 7 to D flat 7, and then you're back on top. So what's interesting about the turnaround is that it's a fairly unique turnaround, but it is still just based off a 1-6-2-5, really. The thing that sort of is important about this turnaround is that we're using, again, 4 minor instead of the 2 chord. So if you look at the turnaround, a normal turnaround would just be like C, A minor, D minor, G7, back to C. And of course you can replace the A minor with an A7. You can even make it an A7 altered, and you can even, when you have A7 altered, that's actually pretty much the same as an E flat 7. And of course the same goes for the G7. A G7 altered is the same as a D flat 7. So those two chords are pretty much the same as what's in the Ladybird turnaround. And the only thing is that we take the E flat 7 and then instead of using it as a tritone substitute, we let it resolve to the one chord, which in this case is then the A flat major 7, and then the D flat 7 back to C. And one thing that's interesting about this progression, I find, is that this is actually going it's kind of pointing towards giant steps. I don't know for sure where Coltrane got the idea for giant steps from, but this could actually be one of the places where that kind of happened. Because if you continue that cycle, so if you continue with, now I modulate it down to the flat 6, and if I do that again, and if I do it again, then I'm back home. So in that way, this is really Coltrane changes what's happening here. And the advantage with that, and maybe the reason why I'm pointing it out, is that often when people start playing giant steps, which I'm not really gonna get into right now anyway, but often it's considered something completely different. And actually, if you approach it from this way of thinking from the turnaround and using the material that you already know from your turnarounds, then you have a more natural transition into it, and it doesn't have to become something completely different and spacey, because it's actually not that far out. It's just moving down a major third, which is the modulations up and down major thirds are very common in jazz standards in general. So for that reason, I think it's just important to also approach it from this point of view, where it's like, okay, we already have a lot of material that is in many ways quite natural to how we normally play in pieces that are more strictly in a key. And if you can take that with you when you play on giant steps, then probably you can play some more natural sounding solos, and you're not so depending on patterns and other types of more systematical approaches. So that's why I want to point that out. I think that's an important thing to just think about. So let's see if we can come up with some ideas. Maybe just so I get into it, I'm just going to play a chorus or two on the song, and then we can talk about some of the ideas that I might use. I think the song is fairly easy to follow, because the good thing about Ladybird is that whenever it changes chord, but most of the time when it changes chord, it's really clear that we're going from C to F minor, or we're going from C to B flat minor, or A flat major to A minor. So there's huge contrast, and it's easy to follow the form. And that can be, especially if you're a beginner, that can be kind of useful actually, just because it's easier to hear what's going on, and you get used to hearing how the period of the pieces are, so that you can hear every 4 bars or every 2 bars something is happening. And I think that's, from a learning standpoint, makes this song really useful to check out quite early on in your jazz career. So that's how the song sounds if I solo on it, and let's just see what I use on it, I guess. I think what I'm going to try to talk about is in part just the material that I use for each of the chords, or at least some of the material that I might use, but also maybe talk a little bit about how I use certain things to go from one chord to another, because I think it's very important that you work on finding solutions in songs from going from one place in the song to another one. And also, if you analyze a song like we just did in the beginning of this video, then hopefully you can generalize that, and that's going to help you have the same tool set in other songs, even if they're in other keys. So the point of understanding the harmony of a song is also that you can sort of generalize the melodic ideas and use them in other tunes. That's hopefully what I can demonstrate in this video. In some ways anyway, that's something I use really a lot. And of course it's important to think about how you get from one chord to the other. So the most important thing you want to work on if you're working on a tune and you're not too used to playing jazz standards is to sort of work on playing towards target notes. Mainly because when you're practicing to play towards a note in the next chord, then you're practicing to make melodies that are moving to the next chord, and you're also already thinking about what's going to come next. You are not trying to keep up with the changes and sort of running after the time and running after the harmony, because that's not a really good plan. It's the same as with reading. You need to think ahead. You need to be ahead of what is happening, and you need to think in advance about, okay, I want to go here. Otherwise you're going to get in trouble. And that's something that's very useful in training. So probably the first thing you want to do is sit down and figure out, okay, I can hit this note, I can hit that note, and how am I going to do that, and practice just rubato, making lines to different target notes. That's something that I find is very useful for learning a tune. So let's see, but what can we do with the C major 7? So the C major 7, of course, it's just a tonic chord, and I think in general I'm not playing too many things that are sort of very out there on a song like this. And there's also, especially if you're in the beginning of a solo, you don't need to just immediately go into space with what you're doing. So keep it simple. I think I actually played a Lydian once when I was playing the two choruses, but for the rest it's just playing C major and Ionian and just simple C major stuff. It's not really about the amount of notes you have available. I think in the end it's just more about what you can do with them. That's going to make it a great solo. It's about sort of connecting the whole thing, and it's about coming up with some strong melodies with the material that you have. So of course, really just C major 7, arpeggio, mixed in with the scale. That's really what's going on. I think I'm using that mostly. Another thing that I use a lot, and that is also because of where we're going with this, is that on a C major 7, the pentatonic scale that sort of works the best, but that works really well, is the E minor pentatonic. So, because it's gonna give us like third, let's see, so third, 5th, 13th, 7th, and the 9th. So all really strong, good sounds, and an added sort of bonus of using it at this point of the song is also that the next chord that is coming up is an F minor 7. So if we're going from C to F minor 7, so we have the E minor that works really well on the C major 7, and of course F minor 7 or F minor pentatonic works really well on the F minor 7. So that way of thinking that you can just shift something up a half step makes it a little bit easier to just come up with some melodic ideas, and it gives you a way to, because you're moving like that, it doesn't really it's a little bit like a counterpoint movement to the what's happening with the bass movement. So it's not really so strictly following the chords, and you don't get the feeling that you're like sort of just playing the the chord structure in a simple way, because you're moving in a sort of a different way than what the chords are moving, and that can be really useful to find these small tricks to just come up with some other melodies. And of course it just means that you can just come up with any sort of E minor pentatonic and melody, and then make a variation on it, but still sort of in your mind you're just moving it up a half step really, and then trying to come to something. You just have to watch out that you don't go, because because that's gonna be too boring to listen to. So you kind of need to be a little bit more free with it, but you can still keep the. And as you can tell, even just having that idea in there, even though I'm playing the other notes that are in the scale as well, because I actually do that, I'm still just using that movement as much as I'm just playing, sort of thinking C major and then F minor. So much for going from C major to F minor. So on the F minor, of course, so we have that pentatonic sound. So I use that really a lot. Whenever I use pentatonic scales, I have a video called Do You Really Know the Pentatonic Scale, where I talk about some of the other exercises that you can sort of find in the pentatonic scale. So one of the ones that I use really a lot is to play the sort of stacks of fourths in there. So which are basically just playing what you could call the diatonic chords of a pentatonic scale. I'll link to the video, you can check it out. And I think they're great for making melodies with, and also when you're using them, then you don't get sort of that type of phrasing. So you get a little bit of different vocabulary and some other melodies that are still just pentatonic, but sound great and work really well for jazz. I think it's a huge part of sort of the modern jazz sound is this pentatonic stacks of fourth type sound. So that's something I use really a lot, and I would use that both on the C major and on the F minor. Okay, B flat 7. So the B flat 7 is the flat 7 dominant in C major, and that's a 4 minor chord, which means that actually it's just an F minor 6 with a B flat on the bass. It's also called the backdoor dominant, and you would use you play it as a Lydian dominant. So F melodic minor. It's not that you have to actually. You can also just stick with it being sort of part of a 2/5 in E flat, and then just play it as a normal B flat 7 out of E flat. So the point of this chord is to go back to C major, and really that's just a question of finding out what notes do you want to hit. And I think in this case there are quite a few notes that you can hit that are gonna be sort of easy to get to. The important, since it's a 4 minor chord, then the important note of it is the flat 6, so in the key, so that's the A flat. And then you can just aim for other notes that are maybe sort of not really there on the B flat 7, so you can aim for an E to go back to C major, or you can aim for the G, or you can aim for the B. So if we aim for the E, then that could be or we can aim for the G. Actually, we should try the other octave, so the lower one. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. I would actually simply do this on a progression, just sit down and figure out the ways to get there. See, we didn't do the B yet, so let's do another one of those. And that's basically the way I would work on it. Just come up with that. And you can tell, like, the lines I'm using here, I mean, they're just basic arpeggio stuff. So the arpeggios that I would connect to a B flat 7 would be, so of course the B flat 7 arpeggio, D half diminished, F minor, and that can be F minor 7. I think I did use that right now, I'm not sure. Of course, if it's Lydian dominant, then that would be an F minor major. And then I also use the, and that's coming more out of the mixed Lydian sound, the A flat major 7. That type of sound. This is something I think I play quite often actually. So that's just using the A flat major 7 sound on over this chord and then using that to resolve to the C. Then we get the B flat minor 7, because the C, I'm not going to talk about that too much again, it's the same material really. One thing that is worth mentioning is, of course, we need to go to the B flat minor 7 from the C. And again, I think it's maybe also just about figuring out like how does the chord really voice lead? Where are the voices moving? And you can of course just sit down and write it out and just look at, okay, what will make the most sense. I think in the case of a C major 7 going to B flat minor 7, then probably we do have this. So a C major triad that moves up to a D flat major triad. So that idea is that E goes up to F, C to D flat, G to A flat. And maybe that's something to use, so you go. So really using that, just aiming for certain notes again. So now we're aiming for the F. Let's see what more can we do. We can try and see if we can aim for. Well, actually, we can also just say that it's in fact a D flat major 7 we have on top with the B flat and the bass, and that. Of course, before that we have the C major 7. So and that means that we can just try and get the major 7 to move up to the 9 on the B flat minor 7. And that it's similar to the way I was using the E minor to F minor on the C major to F minor. And I'm kind of thinking the C major 7 and then moving that up to go to the B flat minor 7 without trying, still trying to avoid playing these type of melodies. But it is still that type of thinking, and that's part of this whole idea that you're sort of thinking about where all the notes are moving if you take them one by one in the chord. And I think that kind of overview is useful, really useful to have to really analyze the harmony on the level of, okay, well, this note goes there and this note goes there. And I think you get really used to thinking like that also if you just keep on working on it and thinking about it like that. The first few times it's going to be really difficult to have the overview, and then once you get used to that, you can probably pretty much do that with any type of chord that you come across. And it's also going to be, I think you'll see that there's also something like it's coming out of the chords that we're playing. So when we're playing, and if I played that without the bass note, then it's very likely that I would be. So there you really see how that moves, and then you use that in your solo as well, without being too obvious about it. That's really all it is. And there, of course, so we can use, so thinking the C major 7 arpeggio, you could think the same thing with, you could do the same with E minor pentatonic and F minor pentatonic, but you probably will miss, like, I don't think I do that really a lot, you'll miss the D flat in there. But you could do the A minor pentatonic, and then use that, so it's like A minor pentatonic up to B flat minor pentatonic. that could be something to sort of think about. And in this case, in this song, it's really a lot of stuff that you can just move up a half step. Or a lot of the harmony seems to move up. Maybe that's why I like the song, because there's something that's happening a lot here. The harmony seems to be moving up all the time, and it's not like so the E minor to F minor, and also in this case like the C major up to D flat major 7 over the B flat minor 7. The thing that's probably important to mention here is that even though I'm talking about this, I don't think other chords. This is something that's part of my vocabulary on the chords that are already there. So even though I am making melodies where I'm moving up the C major 7 arpeggio to a D flat major 7 arpeggio, I'm not really thinking D flat major. I'm still thinking of it as being the chords that are really there. I only really think other chords if I play something that will clash with the original chord, I think. For the rest, it's just having all these other arpeggios available as part of the vocabulary that I have on top of that chord. I think that's sort of an important distinction, because otherwise you have to learn to think all these different progressions, and at least for me, I don't find that very useful. I just tend to play what's there, and then make sure that I have a vocabulary with a lot of different variations and a lot of different possibilities, and that's kind of what's happening here. So I'm not thinking, just to be really clear, that I'm not thinking the D flat major 7 chord. I'm still thinking a B flat minor chord. It's part of the vocabulary on that. I'm just making, if you can say that, but it's sort of an observation that you can move up a half step and then hit the right notes. And it's sort of more an observation of melody than harmony. Okay, so we are on the B flat minor 7, and then the E flat 7. So I think in the first solo that I played just a bit, I think I altered the first one, and then I played diminished on the second chorus. So it is anyway, it's a chord that I'll alter quite often for some reason. So E flat 7 altered going to A flat major 7. So maybe let's just talk about some of those options. I like the sound of the diminished actually the diminished sound works really well with the dominance in this piece in general almost. But maybe let's first look at the altered sound. So if I play this as an altered chord, so E flat altered is of course the same as E melodic minor. So, and I guess it also has something out of the sort of Lydian dominant, which would be the tritone substitute, that type of sound. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I very quickly, whenever I play this, I get the idea to play something around this stagger fourth, which is something I use really a lot. And of course, with an altered scale, the whole point is just figuring out how to sort of get away from it again, because the altered scale is there to just add some tension. And actually the altered scale is playing outside, but we just do it so much that we consider it inside by now probably. But I guess that the sort of material that I'm using, so we get this one, which you can think of as being a stagger fourth, or you can think of it being an A7. And then also just stuff that's really sort of E minor related. So the melodies, again, I'm not thinking E minor on it, but my vocabulary on top of this chord is going to be, so in this case, it's basically coming out of this, so some sort of E minor triad idea, A major triad, and again some sort of E minor idea, and then resolving that to the fifth of A flat. And I think that's the basic thing that I would do on something like this. So here I'm using a triad pair. So A major, and then up to B major, and then some sort of E minor major arpeggio to resolve. This is actually too many notes to fit in that one bar, but it is still that kind of material that I guess that could work if you had to play something with a triad pair. This is sort of the obvious triad pair to use on an alto dominant, so the two major triads next to each other is the first thing everybody goes for. You can do a lot of other ones as well that are really good, but so the most common one is certainly this one. And then we're on the A flat major 7. I mean, once you play the alto chord here, then you can pretty much just resolve to anything you want, but of course the 5th and the 3rd is going to be the most obvious one. The 9th is also good. I think I did that one in the solo, but I'm not sure. So. And so the A flat major 7, whether it's a new tonic or whether it's the flat 6, I guess the material that you would use on that one is the same, because it's just a major 7 chord, and it's pretty much the same as what I would use on the C major. There's really no real difference there. So that's going to be the A flat major 7 arpeggio, the pentatonic scale from the 3rd of the chords of C minor pentatonic. And I think the only thing that's sort of worth mentioning is we kind of need to find a way, so that this is one of the places where you kind of have a somewhat strange transition from chord to chord, because you go from A flat major 7 up to A minor 7. And if you look at what's happening here, so if I play the A flat major 7 like this, just a straight ahead A flat major 7 chord, and make that into an A minor 7, then I would get this. So what happens is actually that we have this 5th, so the root goes up a half step and the 5th goes up a half step, and the two other important notes, so the 7th and the 3rd, actually stay the same. And I guess that is sort of what I would aim for. So I'll be aiming for those notes. I mean, in general, you're just aiming for notes that are not in the previous chord, and then that's going to make everything clear. And you try to avoid hitting the root too much, because it doesn't sound so nice if you're playing unison with the bass all the time. So that means that you can use other notes as well. But in this one, I probably try to aim for the E quite often, because it gets so clear if you do that. So. And yeah, so that's really what's going on. It's just, and you can hit, like if you hit the root is fine, but you need to keep on going when you do so. So yeah, so I guess I'm trying to hit that one, and you can of course also, again, the 9 on the A flat major 7, and then the 9 on the A minor 7 is also sort of a nice transition to aim for. So if you're playing something like, and here, I mean, that's also sort of a way to look at this. I don't think I really use it that much, but one sort of way of thinking about the melody that you're making on top of this would be to think of the C minor here, and then how that actually becomes like a C major on the next chord. So you can play maybe a melody that's really C minor and then turn it into C major. Something like this. That might work. And that way of thinking is also just a way, it's a completely different way of making melodies on top of this movement. So I think that's something that can be worth sort of exploring. And yeah, I don't think I did it in the solo. I guess I just really think about the target notes that I want to hit. And they're all pretty good. I mean, you can hit, it doesn't really matter. If you're going... The D is pretty clear. The C is probably going to get difficult to get out there, but the B is going to be good. So... Can we hit the A? The only thing is, like as I mentioned, don't land on the A really, and the E I already did a lot. So those notes are all notes that you can aim for, and then just try and come up with it. I like the idea of using the sort of C minor 7, C major 7 type sound on there. That's also an easy way to sort of make some interesting melodies that are still connecting across the two chords, because one thing is that you need to make the changes. Of course, that's the basic thing. You just need to make some lines that make sense on the A flat, and then you need to make some lines that make sense on the A minor. But you also need to sort of connect the whole thing. And having this way of thinking where you take a line that you played on the A flat major 7, and then even if you're not really playing the line, if it's somehow still related, then there is some sort of connection. And I think that is going to make the solo as a whole sound better if you're not too sort of square or too obvious about it, which I already mentioned about the things with moving up a half step, where you just sort of very literally move stuff around. There's not really any, that's probably not going to be very good. It's not subtle enough. But if you still approach it so that you're still listening to what you're coming up with, so... That didn't sound that nice actually. That works better, so... In that way, it's going to be a little bit more like or a call response or a motif that you're moving, and it's going to create a context that's going to sit across several chords, and that's definitely something you want to develop along the way also. Especially if you already have the ability to play over the song, then that's what you want to focus on really. Okay, so we have the A minor 7, and then we get the D7. So the 5 of 5 is a thing that's very common in major. Usually it's kind of at the end of a part of the form. That doesn't really apply here because it's the form is quite short. But if you have like a 16 bar form, then in the last line you'll have just 2 bars of the dominant, and then you get a 2/5 back, or at the end of the bridge. Those are sort of common places for the dominant. In this case, so the dominant moves from D7 to D minor 7. It doesn't actually go to the dominant in that sense, even though I'm still talking about the 2/5s as just being one thing. So I'm just talking about the dominant, and they're both actually 2/5s. We still need to find a way to play over the D7 and then get to the D minor 7. And a very common thing to do with that is to use the Lydian dominant on the dominant. So this type of sound. I did that as well, I'm pretty sure. And what that gives us is that we have, instead of a G, we have a G sharp. And since we're not going to G7, then we need to go to D minor 7. And that kind of just, in my head, gives an extra leading note. So we have G sharp going up to A. And actually on that chord we get this happening on top of the chord. And that's sort of one of the reasons why it's nice to use that Lydian dominant sound on the dominant when you're in a major key. And also if you just listen to recordings, it's mostly played like that really in standard recordings. So really the whatever type of D7, sharp 11 or flat 5 you want to think about, then that's what's being used there. And of course you can do a lot of stuff with that. Since you really want to sort of pull out that flat 5 or sharp 11, then there are certain things that you can start working with. So D Lydian dominant is the same as A melodic minor. And one of the scales, one of the arpeggios that I like to use on out of that scale is the G sharp 7 sharp 5, so this one. And in this case, that's also, I mean, it's giving us the G sharp, which was the note that we wanted to emphasize, and we have the C and the F sharp, so we still kind of have like the core of the chord, and then just a 9. So that's something that can be worthwhile checking out. Another one is to use, again, similar to when we played E flat altered, we can use the triad pairs, so we can get into the something like, so the triad pairs in A minor, the most obvious one will be the D and E major triads, and that could be again, similar to with the E flat 7, it's kind of hard to find the room for it, but it is possible. And you can just experiment with using those triads and combining them. I think, again, I guess I try to mix them up a little bit random, and I practice doing that actually. So even to the point where it's like I play 3 of one of them and 4 of the next one. So that's something that I will use. So here's just first inversion, and then down the first inversion. So up the first inversion of the E, down the first inversion of the D, and then just 2 extra notes to get it to fit, and then using that to sort of get to the minor third of the D minor. Another one that I use quite often is the C major 7, so the major 7 sharp 5 sound on the Lydian dominant, because essentially that's already our Lydian dominant sound. I guess we could add the rest like this. So that's also something you can sort of tap into. So. Okay, so those are some of the options you can use on the D7. So the triad pair, major 7 sharp 5, and also this, I think that's not so common, the dominant 7, what's it called? So it's the dominant 7 sharp 5, so A, in this case it's actually the G sharp 7 sharp 5. The other one that's in there is also the E7 sharp 5, which I also use quite a lot. I mean, you can also look at that as just being the augmented triad with an extra note, and the same of course goes for the A flat 7 sharp 5, or G sharp 7 flat 5. Okay, D minor 7. So let's see, what can we talk about that? So it's just a 2-5-1 in the key of C, so there's not really a whole lot to talk about. I guess any minor chord, any 2 chord you want to check out, you want to have your, like, make sure you have the basic arpeggio from the third, the triad from the third is good, and then what I also use a lot, I mean there's so many things you use on this, but like so they're using sort of the pentatonic scale to sort of access the chordal harmony. It's also something that's really useful, and that's really just like if you want to practice your pentatonic scales, like, and then try and use those in lines as well. So of course here I'm using it, sort of turning it into like a altered dominant line later on, but just to get that kind of sound. And yeah, so we have sort of the chordal harmony thing, the arpeggios from the root and from the third, shell voicings. So here I'm using the shell voicing that is found on the third, so that's an F major 7 shell voicing. So that might work, or that might actually works. And right now I'm turning I'm going to an also dominant on the G7, but in the solo, I know in this place in the song I like to use the mini scale. Like I mentioned, the whole thing, the whole song kind of wants to use diminished a lot, and that's also happening here. So probably because the turnaround in the song is going to sort of the minor, the sort of borrowing from minor and the minor subdominant area, and that's really closely sounding to sort of an alto dominant, or if I was to use harmonic minor on the dominant, and therefore it's nice to just have that sort of different sound of using like the 13, so really still sounding connected to the major sound, because we have like the 13 on the dominant, but we also have the flat 9, which is in between. And as you can tell from this voicing, if I play a G7 with a flat 9 and a 13, that's an E major triad on top of a G7. So that's kind of what I'm using, really. Just the triads out of the mini scale. And in this case, so it's a G7, so the triads that we have are G, B flat, D flat and E, and then try and mix them up. They're not triad pairs in sort of the traditional triad pair sense, because that means that they would have no common notes, and they actually do. But they work well as stuff to sort of check out melodies with. So E major triad, and then a B flat triad. You can of course do that in different places. Those kind of ideas, and it's just combining them. I think I talked about it before, but I found for me it works really well to just sort of sit around and try and come up with different sort of combinations of it, and just get used to how you can go from one to the other, and hopefully it'll give you some melodic ideas that you can use. So I'm just playing like one triad and then trying another one. Make sure to use the inversions of the triads well. You need to know your triads and inversion. It's really important for having some melodic freedom in these type of ideas, I think. Yeah, okay, and then we get the turnaround. So we're on the C major 7 and it's going to E flat 7. You could use the same idea. I think I use the same idea actually quite a lot as I do when I go from C to B flat minor, so that you can move up stuff a half step. Because if you like in this context, sort of a D flat major 7 type line or arpeggio type line like this will still sound really close to this, and that means you can do so we only have 4 notes, so So that can work quite well to do that. And so you can use that, and then the other one that I used now was just to play the B flat minor 7. So those kind of things will work well. And of course, just you can also turn it into let's see, can you do that actually? Well, you can kind of turn it into just moving around in pentatonic scales. So like on the C you would use A minor, on the E flat 7 you would use a B flat minor, on the A flat you would use a C minor, and then a C minor pentatonic, and then on the D flat 7, actually I'll just play like a D flat 7. So let's see how that will work. So that's also a way to sort of move through the changes. For the rest, I use a lot of stuff that I come up with comping also. So and then use that in solo. So So I have to watch out that my camera doesn't run out of memory here. But so what I'm using here is just playing through the progression and then trying to hit sort of target notes. And I think, well, if you're not used to playing on turnarounds, like the, then probably that's what you want to do first, and then you can move to play on this one. But I think the idea is just to really, again, train yourself to think ahead and then see what kind of lines you can come up with. And it's always about just being 1 or 2 steps, or one, actually in this case, because the chords are moving so fast, you need to be 1 or 2 chords ahead of what you're playing. And like, I think that the way I played it now in tempo is the kind of way you want to work on that. So just play like 8 notes in tempo, trying to hit certain notes and figure out what notes you want to hit. So in this case, I mean, when you move from the C to the E flat 7, then you can hit, I will aim for the D flat, and the F and the B flat are probably sort of the basic notes that you want to aim for. So something like that. B flat. Let's hit the D flat. How do we do that? Something like that. And the B flat, D flat, F. So that's sort of how I would play that transition. So aim for a note and then trying to come up with a small melody. This is a puzzle, and this is something that, as I said, like first you want to do this on your normal turnarounds because you need them a lot more than you need this one. But on the other hand, keep in mind that when you're working on it on this song, you're kind of already practicing towards playing giant steps. So it is worthwhile spending some time on, because that's definitely something you probably want to check out at some point. And then for the rest, let's see. So once we are on the, I guess to just keep it really clear, you want to use just the basic notes on the A flat major 7, so that really the C and the E flat. And in fact, the difference between the notes you have available on the A flat major 7 and the D flat 7 is only the B, or the C flat, if you want to call it that. So that's the note you want to hit, really. For the rest, you can also just, I mean, on the A flat major 7, you probably wouldn't emphasize the A flat as much. So sort of think of it a little bit as going. So kind of going A flat major, A flat minor, and then trying to resolve that to C, because that's where it goes from there. So I guess that's a little bit what I'm doing with it also. And then you can look at all the different sort of movements that you can make on top of the chords and see if you can make some sort of other movement through it. So that would be like playing C major or E minor even, but let's just say C major, B flat minor, A flat major, A flat minor, back to C. And then, of course, like I talked about with the pentatonic scale, so I guess we can play something that's like C major, D flat major, which is basically like an E flat sus chord, and then on top of the A flat major 7, I guess we can also just look at that as being an E flat triad. So now we have, and then what I'm doing is, so C major, D flat major, and then this type of sort of E flat over A flat, and then basically that's like it's a D flat 7 really, but it's just like an F diminished triad back to sort of C. So those kind of movements, so really find sort of a different progression that you can just play the harmony of and use that to make melodies with. This is really similar to how I talked about moving from the E minor to the F minor pentatonic on the first change from C minor to F minor, or but in this case we're sort of trying to solve a puzzle so that we can have something that's kind of playable and that we can use as a roadmap to move along the neck through a progression which is moving as fast as a ladybird turnaround. And I think that's also worthwhile to just have those as well, because one thing is you want to have the lines that are just going to be like, oh sorry, sort of really standard pop lines full of 8 notes, but you kind of also want to have the other sort of counterpoint moving arpeggio stuff happening that you can also throw in there, because it just sounds different. That's a lot of ideas. I'm a little bit curious how long this video is going to get, because I had to turn off my camera twice. So I'll probably edit a little bit of it out, but I'll also maybe just leave it kind of, I wanted to do this in a live stream, but it's hard for me to, because I live in Europe and most of you guys are in the States, it's a little bit hard for me to find a time where that actually works for everybody. But I will probably do this in a live stream at some point anyway. So if you made it this far in the video, I hope you found some stuff and some ideas that you can use. Feel free to ask stuff in the comments, and hopefully I can explain some of it. And for the rest, let me know if you have some great ideas for a progression like Ladybird, and then we can also talk about that, of course. And if you are not already subscribed to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel. You can also turn on notifications if you want to get a notification whenever I put up a new video. That's also a really huge help for my channel. And for the rest, there's a new lesson on Thursday, so thank you for watching, and until next time.